So we're about halfway through the production process. The next step is pretty critical, and this is where we do all of our hand lasting. And I'll try to pick a good example here. Basically what's happening is that they're pulling that inside lining leather, and then they're pulling that outside leather, and this process is called lasting. So basically they're wrapping that boot around the form. Depending on what size, it could be a little bit different. Here, I'll show you. Walk over here. Here's a good example. So they'll take the boots that have been turned, they'll match them up with a certain size last, and now they're going to start to hand last them here like he's doing here. Every single one of our boots are lasted this exact same way. You got to keep in mind they're lasted wet. So what we want to do is an ironing process that's indirect, and it basically wicks moisture away from the leather. So if we walk into our hot room, this process takes place in this hot room. So what happens is once the boot is lasted, you can see that if you look closely, you might be able to see the last that's still in the boot. So what happens is that the heat that's in this room has to do an indirect ironing process to the leather. This is going to prevent the leather from shrinking or expanding improperly. The boots stay in here for 24 hours. Once they're dry and they've taken the shape of the last, now we're ready to welt the product. So come on and I'll show you that. One of the great things about walking through our plant is you can see the different colors and styles. Here's a great example of one right here. Just sort of a cool boot. One of a lot that you'll see running through the plant. So you never know what you'll find here on a given day. But you can get an idea of what people are wearing, the different colors, the styles, and the patterns. So here's the welting process here. Let's walk over this way one. So if you look close, you can see that we've just sewn the welt onto the insole that we saw lasted in the previous process. Look a little closer and you'll see how the machines are doing it now. Once the welt is put on, now we're ready for the outsole. So before the outsole goes on, you can see we have these metal shanks to give the boot support when the last is out. And those are hot. Woo! Didn't realize those were so hot. Once that metal shank is on, then the outsoles are pressed, and you can see there what the bottom of the boot looks like before the outsole goes on. The outsoles are pressed. Once the outsoles are pressed, we're ready for a trim over here. You can see how much excess is on the product. It takes a really skilled eye to get this done to perfection. So you can see now it's sort of taking the shape. You see the welt that was sewn on in the previous process. You saw the outsole that was pressed. Now we're ready to stitch it. So you can see we got quite a few machines that are doing the process, and he's going to take a boot. Maybe you can slide on in there. Slide on in there and you can see how that welt is. So basically what this stitch does is it's going to secure the welt to the outsole. Okay, you see those little indentions there, the perforations? Those are going to be pushed in a different step. So once the welt is stitched on, this machine will actually go in and press the leather back into itself. Water is sort of leather's worst enemy when it comes to the bottom of the boot, so we want to do everything that we can do to make sure water doesn't go in there. Once that's happened, this process here is where we'll take these brass tacks and we'll actually start to get a rolled shank because of it. So we'll take these brass tacks. This is how it looks before, and you can see what a difference it makes once it's been tacked on there. Okay? So once they've been brass tacked, now we're ready for the heel to come on. So you got the heel operation right now. There's probably 9 to 12 different heels that you can put on a boot. The heels need to make sure that they're properly set for weight distribution and make sure that everything looks even. Once the heels are put on, you can see how raw it looks. We put a rubber pad on there for some stability. Now we're ready to shape the outsole to symmetry. So in the next few steps, that's where that takes place. You have a few different sanders, starting with a little bit stronger to finer grit paper throughout the process here. Once that takes place, once they're all done sanding the outsoles, you can see how smooth it looks compared to that black boot that we just pulled off the rack. Now, once the outsole and the heels have been sanded to symmetry, we're ready to paint them. So this is where the inking happens. So depending on what you're looking for, it could be mahogany, brown, black, or even make it natural. This ink has a wax-based property to help repel water during the lifetime of the boot. Okay, so now once it's been inked, we're ready to buff it. So there's a series of buffing stations here. Most of them have a wax base to them. So again, we're introducing a little bit more wax into the leather. And this is going to make the outsole shine once it's been buffed out completely. So you can see how nice and shiny that looks as compared to the matte paint that was on that earlier process. So once it's been buffed and waxed, now we're ready for our heel stamp. They happen to be working on 1883s right here, so this is where our heel stamp's going to get pressed onto right here. It's a high temperature press. He lines it up right center of the sole, and we're good to go. You can see that this entire rack has all been stamped. Now, if you notice, the tops of the boot are pretty weak looking. So now what we want to do is we want to stretch these out and iron them so they look nice and strong. That's what happens here. These are our tree irons. So basically what he's doing is he's taking this low temperature flame and he's cauterizing any of the nylon threads that might happen. While that's happening, these presses are pushing the top quarters out so they're nice and stretched and ironed out. This is really the only way to do it. There's one old traditional way we'll show you here in a minute. This is where I like to say if we were to put our competitors' boots on these things, they'd melt because they're all made of plastic. We've got a couple of stations where they do final touch-up work. They'll take itty-bitty paintbrushes and they'll go into the small cracks that big paintbrush couldn't do in the earlier process. We go through a quality checkpoint here. How are you? Muy bien, Easted. There's about 5 of these throughout the plant. India's working on some 1883, it looks like, so she's going to make sure that they line up, that there's really nothing wrong with the product. She takes special care that each pair matches up to near perfect quality. Once that happens, it gets a check to ship out. This is another staging area to make sure that everything is put back in the right lots that need to go to. They jump over to our shipping department. This is the area where they'll double check the style number, they'll put the tag or the label on the box, and they'll ship it out. 9 times out of 10, once these boots are packaged, they jump onto a shipping truck and they head out to the customer right away. That takes you through a really, really quick run-through of our plant. Like I said, there's over 100 different steps in the boot making process. We've got a 100,000 square foot facility here in El Paso. Keep in mind that everything that says Lucchese on is built right here in the United States. We hope that you ever get a chance to come to El Paso, Texas, you visit us. We're Lucchese Boot Company.